Ubicación is a word in Spanish. It means location. And ubicación, ubicar, which means to find, but it also means to know your place, ubicarse, to know your place not just physically, but metaphorically, to know your place in the world. It's exceedingly important for you to know where you belong, where you fit in. And just as importantly, to know where you don't belong, where you don't fit in. If you don't, you can be in trouble. So I'm going to practice what I preach insofar as this video is concerned, because I'm going to talk about the Manosphere. Now, the Manosphere is a little bit of the Wild West, but it's important, and this YouTube channel belongs in the Manosphere. And so I think it's important at the outset to sort of like figure out where it fits in, where it belongs, and more importantly, where it doesn't fit in, where it doesn't belong.
First of all, what is the Manosphere? Well, simply put, it's a collection, a loose collection, of mostly online commentary and discussion around issues affecting contemporary men in the Western democracies. Now, there are essentially three groups within the umbrella term the Manosphere. The first group, the oldest one, is the men's rights movement, comprised of MRAs, men's rights activists. The Men Going Their Own Way movement is the second leg of this tripod. It's abbreviated MGTOW, M-G-T-O-W. And the third group is the neo-masculine movement. Now, the first two, the men's rights activists and the Men Going Their Own Way movement, they've grown and developed as a reaction to feminism and the negative effects that feminism has had on the culture and on men in particular. But the neo-masculine movement has grown not as a reaction to feminism, but as a reaction to the deregulation of the sexual marketplace. Now, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Cassie Jaye, in her film The Red Pill, popularized a very handy way of distinguishing between the three movements. She said that the members of the MRAs, the men's rights activists, want to reform the current social structure. Members of the MGTOW movement, the Men Going Their Own Way movement, want to escape from the current social structure, whereas the members of the neo-masculine movement want to take advantage of the current social structure. Now, these labels, these approaches, they're handy, but they're not quite accurate, as we're going to just see in just a second. But for the time being, they'll do. Now, the MRAs, the men's rights activists, now, they are, as the name implies, interested in men's rights. They're interested in issues such as alimony, child custody, paternity fraud, and how society tacitly endorses it, and a host of other issues that directly affect men who have had families. Now, this matters. Warren Farrell is generally considered the father of the movement. He was a second-wave feminist who was lauded by Gloria Steinem, among other feminist luminaries. But then, in the 1970s and 80s, Farrell wrote a series of books arguing that society depended on men to make sacrifices for the overall good, but that society was ignoring these sacrifices that men were making, while at the same time inflicting on men discriminatory laws and standards, especially with regards to child custody. This simple, self-evidently true, and very moderate position led to Warren Farrell being excommunicated from the feminist movement, and it led to him directly becoming the de facto founder of the men's rights movement. Farrell is not a former feminist who became disillusioned. He's still a feminist. Rather, he's an old-school second-wave feminist who got left behind. What Farrell was interested in, and is still interested in, is in, quote, a gender liberation movement freeing both sexes from the rigid roles of the past towards more flexible roles for their future, end quote. In other words, Farrell believes that men and women are equal in all regards, and he believes in the feminist conceit that there is such a thing as gender, which is socially constructed and socially imposed. He follows Simone de Beauvoir's famous line, "One is not born a woman, one becomes one," a line which is very famous but patently untrue and is in fact the central intellectual flaw of second and especially third-wave feminism. Now, right now, Paul Elam is the standard-bearer for the men's rights movement. His website, A Voice for Men, is ground zero for the MRAs. At this time, the men's rights movement are essentially behaving like just another identity group, in this case, predominantly white divorced men. Their political objectives are fairly sane and in any normal society would be considered non-controversial. They want the custodial parent to be determined on merit, not by virtue of the parent's sex. They want an end to the tacit condoning of paternity fraud on the part of society. They want alimony and child support laws to be changed to be more equitable. I mean, all of this is perfectly legitimate and normal. But notice these objectives and notice whom they affect. The men's rights movement isn't really a men's rights movement. It's a divorced men's rights movement. Its concerns and outlook and aims aren't those of young men. They're the concerns and outlook and aims of older men who are living in the aftermath of failed relationships and nasty divorces. It doesn't help their cause that the leaders of the MRA movement tend to come across as fairly bitter individuals, in particular, unfortunately, Paul Elam himself.
Hi everyone, Paul here with An Ear for Men. You know, there's nothing in my demographic information that tells me whether my viewers are married or in a long-term relationship or single. I have to assume from the comments that most of you are single, and that most of you who aren't have chosen well enough that you don't live with a crazy bitch that's making you miserable. At least I hope that's the case. To start this talk on setting boundaries with crazy bitches, I want to first mention the book I co-authored with Dr. T, Say Goodbye to Crazy, which can only be described as a book about setting limits with crazy bitches. It is, from cover to cover, 264 pages of drawing a line in the sand and lobbing off toes when the line gets crossed. From just about the time they are born, men are trained to believe that earning a woman's wrath puts them in the wrong. Not to mention, it's guaranteed trouble. That starts with mothers and ends up just about the time you die. If there's an afterlife, you better hope there's a dude in charge. And it would be nothing less than idiotic to forget the fact that women can and do certainly cause some very real problems when they are pissed at men. I could go on about that, but for now I want to focus on the common mentality in most humans about the power of women.
As you can tell, Elam is one angry guy. I mean, he can rein in his rage when he needs to, but in his YouTube channel and his articles on the website A Voice for Men, that rage is on full display. A rage that his detractors successfully exploit by labeling it misogyny. Now this matters because it means that the MRAs and the men's rights movement under his leadership are never going to be politically effective.
Now the second major movement in the Manosphere is MGTOW, men going their own way. The hub of them is the MGTOW.com website. There are a bunch of YouTube channels that are MGTOW. Now, these are men who have essentially decided to eschew society altogether, most especially the society of women, and forego the normal path of most men. They are young men who are deciding to live not for their wider society and not to contribute to the wider society, but to rather live for themselves. Now, this is exceedingly troubling for a whole host of factors because you essentially have a group of men who are on strike from society. It should worry us.
Dave, so do you want to explain what MGTOW is to Rebel?
Well, MGTOW is a worldwide movement now. Social media can be thanked for that. What it is men have decided to no longer participate in relationships with women as a result of all the issues with family courts, false rape allegations, and all kinds of slander coming from feminists. For the most part, we're not going to say that we're anti-women. I know that we're often accused of that, but it's very unfortunate. That's not why we're here. We're just trying to protect ourselves. This is a reactionary movement. I guess maybe it takes bachelorism into more of an activist level, where we're absolutely not participating in relationships with women to stay away from all the problems that exist.
The MGTOW movement encourages men to not marry and to have nothing to do with women altogether, supporting their position by pointing to a simple cost-benefit analysis of any kind of romantic relationship with a woman. The man will always lose in such an analysis. So why would anyone rational pair bond with a woman, let alone marry her, with all the legal and economic risks that entails in the current third-wave feminist-dominated legal system currently in place? Now, this is, of course, a rationalization. Such a risk analysis that comes out against getting married is a way to self-justify the fact that you can't get married because nobody wants to marry you. because that's the hard reality of the MGTOW movement. They are men who have failed to secure a woman in the current sexual market environment. Therefore, they rationalize their loneliness with rational-seeming risk analysis bullshit. These are men who consciously turn their back on society in favor of, quote, focusing on and developing themselves, which is bullshit. They're just lonely guys who can't get laid.
It's easy to feel contempt for the members of the MGTOW movement. It's easy to call them losers, but that would be a mistake. These men are the unfortunate victims of the sexual market deregulation. Their fear, their loneliness, their anger, their rejection of women, it is all reasonable because these are the men who were left behind when the sexual market was deregulated, and we are now living in this new culture that we have. To feel contempt for them, to feel dismissive towards their concerns, is a huge mistake. We should understand them, and we should also understand that a lot of the times the sense of contempt we might have towards them, the sense of making fun of them, of looking down on them, it might be in fact a way that we are hiding our own fear of becoming like them. Good, decent men who are lonely, who are afraid, who have no one in their lives and nothing to look forward to. So when we look at MGTOWs, we should always be thinking of them as our brothers who are not so successful as us perhaps, not so clever at surfing the zeitgeist, but just because they're not as clever as us does not allow us to dismiss them. Not at all.
Now, both the MRAs and the MGTOW evolved as a reaction to feminism, especially late-stage third-wave feminism. If you understand third-wave feminism as an ideology of female supremacy, which in point of fact is the only way you can understand third-wave feminism, because it fights to give Western women prerogatives unavailable to anybody else, especially unavailable to Western men, then it's much easier to understand how the MRAs and MGTOW have grown, especially in the last few years. As third-wave feminism has become socially, politically, and legally entrenched in our society, MRAs and MGTOW, which are the umbrella groups of those men being socially, politically, and legally ostracized by late-stage third-wave feminism, have grown rapidly and will continue to grow and thrive. But, and this is the key issue, they will both remain politically marginalized, no different from the John Birch Society or the Green Party. They exist, they're there, but nobody takes them into account when making political decisions. Not because they are numerically small, they're not. And not because their aims are bad. On the contrary, their aims are very good. They are marginalized politically because they do not understand how to apply political pressure. The men's rights movement is headed by people too strident, too blinded by their own hurt to be effective, while the MGTOW, in a very real sense, does not care about the rest of society because they are fleeing from it. So they certainly don't care about reforming society via political means. The most interesting group in the Manosphere, and the group that could potentially play a very large role in the political future of the Western democracies, is the neo-masculinity movement. This is the one group in the Manosphere that did not arise as a reaction to feminism. Rather, they arose as a reaction to the deregulation of the sexual marketplace.
I've talked about this deregulation of the sexual marketplace more than once. So let me explain it. It's very simple. The deregulation of the sexual marketplace means that in the current social environment, a person can fuck whomever they want. So long as you fancy them, so long as they are of age, and so long as there is consent, you can go to bed with whomever you want. There are no social constraints insofar as your sexual activity. That's what it means to talk about the deregulation of the sexual marketplace.
The old ideas of not being a slut, of being a good girl, church, the family, your reputation, all those limits that were placed on people's sexuality, they are all gone. We are currently living in a sexual state of nature. It's a sexual free-for-all, But, like in any state of nature, the outcomes become grossly unfair very quickly, which means that in this sexual state of nature that we are currently living in, there are a few select at the top who get all the pussy. Call them the 1% of pussy. And there is a vast 60% of single men who get nothing. Zip, nada, nothing but the hairy palm. These people are the incels, involuntary celibates. The 50-60% of the single male population who, on any given Saturday night, has a date with a porn site, a tube of KY jelly, and a box of Kleenex.
You think I'm being funny? You think I'm just kidding around? What do you think that kind of sexual frustration leads to? Now, between that 1% of pussy and that 60% of involuntary celibates, that's where the neo-masculine movement came from. It came from the pickup artist community.
Now, the pickup artist community were basically nerdy kids who couldn't get a girlfriend in the deregulated sexual marketplace. So they did what nerdy kids do. They put their brains up against a problem until they solved it, successfully reverse engineering the way that, quote, alpha males seduced girls. This series of algorithms became systematized and was dubbed game theory. Neil Strauss, in his book The Game, brought game theory to mainstream attention, but for the most part, the pickup artist community was on the fringes of society. They would have remained on those fringes had it not been for Roosh V and his website Return of Kings. Roosh V started off as a successful pickup artist before launching Return of Kings in 2012. The site quickly morphed from a website about picking up girls into a more political, more practical, more interesting place. Roosh V himself coined the term neo-masculinity, which he described as follows, quote, neo-masculinity combines traditional beliefs, masculinity, and animal biology into one ideological system. It aims to aid men living in westernized nations that lack qualities such as classical virtue, masculinity in males, femininity in females, and objectivity, especially concerning ideas about beauty and human behavior. It also serves as an antidote for males who are being programmed to accept Western degeneracy, mindless consumerism, and immoral state authority. As Return of Kings evolved and the different writers began contributing to the site, it stopped being about picking up girls and started becoming about how to be a man in a contemporary Western democracy. What's clear is the neo-masculinists are a community trying to help each other make up for the fact that they were raised without men. Either they were raised by single mothers without a male role model around, or they were raised by men with such a tentative grasp on what it is to be a man that, for all intents and purposes, these father figures were eunuchs. Of the three groups that make up the Manosphere, the neo-masculinists have the youngest demographic, and they are far and away the most brainiac of the bunch. Which is why they are also the most coldly rational and objective of the three strains of the Manosphere. The MRA's outlook is irrational and reactive, clouded over by gender equalism brought by Warren Farrell, a gender equalism that's stamped into its DNA. The MRA's irrationality is also amplified by the anger of so many of its members who've been screwed over by women and society. The MGTOWs, the men going their own way, they're also irrational and reactive, as its members are both angry and afraid of women and of society, which is why they have chosen to eschew both women and society altogether. Not so the neo-masculinity movement. They look at things as they are, coldly and rationally, and they are unclouded by either equalism, fear of society, or anger towards women. The neo-masculinists haven't figured out their political objectives yet, but they will. Right now they're figuring out what they believe in, trying to establish an overall coherent outlook. They don't have any kind of common economic ideas, except a vague and unfocused laissez-faire. They don't have any ideas as regards to social organization and how to change the current social framework. But in a lot of their writings, you can see that they're starting to think about the serious issues of our times. My thinking is, neo-masculinity will not become a political party. Instead, and ironically just like the feminists, It will become a political movement closely allied with a political party, but separate from it. The neo-masculine movement has already created a social culture, it is well on its way to creating a political outlook, and in time it will create an economic framework.
I think the future belongs to the neo-masculine movement, and I think that this channel belongs to that future. This channel fits with neo-masculinity in terms of outlook, priorities, worldview, most especially the notion of looking at things as they are, as opposed to how we wish they were. Like I said at the start of this video, ubicación is key. You always want to know where you fit in and where you belong. The name of this YouTube channel is Coach Red Pill, and it implies that my goal is to help younger guys figure out the world, help younger guys become red-pilled. Neo-masculinity wants the same thing. It wants young guys to figure out the world and move forward through it. So that's why I think that this channel belongs there.